Hello, my name is Pedro Diaz from Play It Yourself, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Christopher Badell from Greater Than Games regarding their upcoming Sentinels of the Multiverse Definitive Edition Kickstarter campaign. This is my first interview ever, and I didn't expect to actually publish it, but I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, good morning. I am Christopher Badell, one of the co-owners of Greater Than Games and the designer of Sentinels: The Multiverse and writer of all things Sentinel Comics.
All right, thanks. Just to be clear, Pedro
Yeah,
Diaz, and I'm in a channel called Play It Yourself. All right, thanks. So
thank you,
I want
Pedro.
to get the obvious question out of the way,
Sure.
which is why a new edition of
That that
Sentinels?
that is the question, right? Why a new
Yeah.
one? What I really should do is, because I get this question every time, is I should have a copy of the original edition right here, so I can be like, well, here's the original edition, and look at it. It's good, but like, look at it, and then compare that to this. Like, it's it's just better. I finally this week got the pre-production copy in, so
Nice.
it's not final, but even still, the this does all the things that we hoped we could do, which was
Mhm.
the game Sentinels: The Multiverse still sells incredibly well. It's a game that we've been selling since 2011, and to this day, it's one of our top selling games. And yet, it we made it in 2011. We didn't know what we were doing. It was our very first game we'd ever made, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited that we got to make such a cool thing that was so important to us. But the Sentinels: The Multiverse is the game that we learned how to make games, how to make games
Mhm.
into products at least. Like that's the thing is like there's lots of different game design that we've done, and I've certainly done far worse game design than Sentinels: The Multiverse in the last 11 years. But everything we've done in terms of making products has gotten better. Adam who's the artist who does all of the art for Sentinels: The Multiverse, has certainly improved as an artist. And if you do art for over 40 hours a week, every week for 11 years, you'll probably get better at it. And sure enough, he has. If you look at the art from the core game of Sentinels: The Multiverse versus the later expansions, and even now to the RPG we just put out, Sentinels: The Multiverse, or rather Sentinel Comics, the role-playing game. Two different games. I gotta not get the names mixed up. Um, and Adam's art just continues to get better all the time. And so that was really the inciting incident, was Adam and I going, okay, the game's coming up on its 10th anniversary, and it really would be nice if every time Adam looked at anything from one of our top selling games, he wasn't immediately repulsed. He hates any art of his that's old. And he looks at it, he's like, who drew this? This is garbage. What monster created this? And we're like, Adam, this is art that people love. He's like, well, they're wrong. He's like, okay, calm down. So we started with like, okay, let's just redo the art. That was the thing. Like, we're gonna put out a 10th year anniversary edition, and it will just be updated art and maybe cleaned up text here and there. And as we went down that road and started talking about all the things we could do, we realized, oh, but really we could actually dial in more here. And when we made this game in the first place, we based it on the stories that we had been telling about Sentinel Comics. And we've been telling stories of Sentinel Comics for about a year by the time we made this game.
Mhm.
Now we've been doing it for well over 10 years. And so we knew everything there was to know when we started about Sentinel Comics. Well, now we know far more because we've had to. We've
Sure.
lived in this ecosystem for so many years. And so it was just a matter of like, okay, get let's get Sentinels: The Multiverse to look and feel, to be representative of the stories that we're telling and the stories that we're thinking of when we talk about Sentinel Comics. And going down that road was one that led to doing more and more things, and we ended up with Definitive Edition.
Awesome. It's a very good pitch. I really
I
like
hope
it.
so.
I wonder if 10 years from now we'll see a newer
Right.
version.
And this is a question we get a lot. And the thing is, I don't think so, because the thing that we didn't do was, okay, well, let's just make it so that the art is this is the thing that we talked about. Sorry, like, okay, so what is preventing us from just doing this again every 10 years? We don't want to do
Sure.
that. We want to put out something that
Okay.
does feel like a definitive edition. They're like, no, this
Sure.
is correct. This is right.
Mhm.
And the thing that we did for that was that the game, um, like the mechanics and everything aren't drastically changed. They're cleaned up. They're the way they should be. It still plays like Sentinels the Multiverse. There's a lot of things that are better defined. Besides telling these stories and writing these games, we've been playing this game now for 11 years. And in the process of playing it, learned the ways that it's played and the ways that people interact with it. And so we've gotten much better. We have a better vocabulary than we used to for that. And so the thing that prevents it from just being, well, 10 years from now, Adam's art will be even better than it is now. So
Exactly.
at that point, we'll just have to do another one with new art. Is that the Adam didn't draw these cards with like I'm going to do the best art I can. He drew these cards for like, it's a definitive edition thing. We're like, okay, well, hold on. This legacy card here is depicting legacy doing this, but what story is this? Let's go through and let's make sure we're pulling. I have this giant spreadsheet of every comic book that Sentinel Comics ever put out, and who the creative team on it is, and when what the month and the year that it came out, and what the stories in those comics were. And we have a podcast called The Letters Page that gets into all of that. And so we're like, okay, well, hold on. If we've got this card, Danger Sense from Legacy's deck, what is that card depicting? And it's depicting legacy like rearing back, avoiding some fire. But what story is that from? Let's dig into this. Oh, wait, hold on. That's not even supposed to be Legacy. That's supposed to be Legacy's father, who is also Legacy, but it's not supposed to be the Legacy who's the main one.
Yeah.
And that means that is from early Justice Comics 98. That's super early. That's still in the golden age. Well, if it's the golden age, that means it's a different art style. And so I don't know if the camera will pick this up very well, but so the new Danger Sense art, come on, focus here. I'll hide my face so it tries to focus not on my face. Sorta. Anyway, the new Danger Sense art is this golden age art style, whereas then you get something like Heroic Interception, and Heroic Interception was from Freedom 5 Annual number 12, which was in like, I think it was in the 70s, I'm pretty sure. I could look it up here. It's not important, but now that I've said it, I want to know.
In the mythical spreadsheet?
Yeah, I always have it open on my second monitor because otherwise, how do I live? Freedom 5 Annual number 12. Oh, I bet you it's going to be in the 80s. I bet you I was wrong. No. 91. What am I thinking of? Oh, right, of course, because I was thinking of the Bicentennial, but that's a different art. That is, the Bicentennial is the Inspiring Presence and Independence Day Spectacular. Right. So that's the one that I was thinking of, that is from the 70s. But the one from the early 90s, Heroic Interception, is like, it's still, oh man, this is not the best way to see these arts, but it's still Legacy catching a missile before it hits the White House. Okay, but the art style matches the era of when that story was told. So, so the point of this being that these cards, because we went through and we did so much research, like we did a ton of research on exactly how all of the arts were made for comics, how comics were made in these different eras, and Adam restricted himself to like certain there's a fun one in Ra's deck, Ra, the ancient god of the sun. The hair color of Dr. Blake Washington Jr., who is the guy who becomes Ra. Dr. Blake Washington Jr. has brown hair, but the first time we see him in the Golden Age, his hair is blonde. And it's not because he has blonde hair, but it's because they just didn't have a very big color palette when making these comics. And so we see Dr. Blake Washington Jr. on this card, and it's like, that's his hair color because it's one of the like 4 or 5 hair colors you get in this era. If you think about in Marvel Comics, the character of Norman Osborn has really weird hair. He's got like little like rows in his hair, and it's alternating black and red stripes. And it's like, why is his hair this weird way? Well, it's because when he was introduced, they wanted him to have brown hair, and so they made his hair black and red stripes to try to read as red. And then that just like lasted through for comics. Anyway, point being, we matched all the styles. The art from the 40s, it was done in the art style and the art medium, using the art tools from the 40s. Adam was actually like having to cut the cellulose pieces to put together to create the color layers for these early arts, all the way down the line, so that in 10 years, Adam will be a better artist than he is now. But he's not going to be notably better 10 years from now at making art from the 50s than he is now.
Yeah.
Like he's matching to each style. So
I get it.
there's the answer.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool.
I'm sure I went off on this horrible tangent. I'm sorry for taking up so
No,
much time talking about that.
That's totally fine. Like that's what I want to hear. That's really
Okay.
cool. All right. Yeah. So the new box comes with more characters than the original base box.
Yes. Yes.
And we already know that it's the Freedom 5.
Mm-hmm.
Is the rest still a secret or?
Oh no. No. So
Awesome.
there's 2 hero teams in the core box. That was one thing that we wanted to do, is we wanted to be like, okay, let's reorganize all of the, because it's not just the 10 heroes from the original core game plus 2 more, because it's 12 heroes now. It's a different set of 12 heroes. We were like, well, let's go through and organize each of these sets. So we have 6 boxes planned. We have the core game and 5 major expansions, and there's not going to be any mini expansions. There's not going to, like Unity previously was a mini expansion, a solo deck by herself. Great. No, that's not how we're going to do it. Yeah. Unity is in fact now in the core game, because the core game is the Freedom 5, and then Unity's in there because when you have the Freedom 5, you've got Unity. She goes with them. Yeah. And then you have an entire second team in the core game, which is the Prime Wardens. And so the Prime Wardens are Argent Adept, Fanatic, Haka, Captain Cosmic, and Tempest, and they are in the core game as well, along with their frequent ally, but not member of the team, but frequently part of, frequently like allied with various members of the team, Ra. And so you have, those are your 12 heroes, two 5-hero teams, and 2 single hero allies of those teams. And so I know it's putting the cart before the horse a bit here, but the first expansion we're going to do is about the team Dark Watch, and so it will have Night Mist and Mr. Fixer and Setback and Expatriate and the Harpy and other stuff as well. But yeah.
Okay, that's very cool. So that also eliminates a different question that I had, which would be if they are coming in order. It's cool they are not.
Yeah, they're coming in an order, and then really I think that the order that they're coming in now is that we're going to be releasing them is much more intentional to the to the arc of Sentinel comics. It's less about being a chronological arc and more about being kind of a thematic one, because like, okay, well, when we're looking at these various characters and what they've done, the stories that we're like, well, how do we organize these expansions? Because we made the whole plan out of everything very early on. We're like, let's name, the core game is the core game. It's Sentinels the Multiverse, Definitive Edition, core game. Okay, great. Each of the big box expansions that we're going to make is named after one of the primary runs of comics, one of the primary books of comics. So if the core game were going to have a name like that, I could see either calling it Freedom 5, but that is not fair to the Prime Wardens, or Justice Comics, which is one of the big comic books for Sentinel Comics, is the Justice Comics run. Fortunately, it's a core game, so it doesn't need a name like that because there's just too much stuff in it like that. But each of the expansions, which I'm now looking at all the expansions, each of the expansions has a name directly from the titles of the comic books from Sentinel Comics.
Very cool. Is one of those names Oblivia?
It is.
Okay.
Spoilers, but yeah. How did you know what the last expansion would be?
Magic.
That's very impressive.
So it's still the end of the line. It still ends with it.
It still ends with Oblivion, although it still ends with Oblivion and the team style villain, the team villain style play that we saw in the Vengeance and Villains of the Multiverse expansions will still be part of this run. It will one of the 6 boxes will be dedicated to that, and one of the 6 boxes will be dedicated to Oblivion, and then 3 of the expansions will be regular expansions, but the Vengeance, the villain style, the team villain style play, and the Oblivion style play are being significantly overhauled. That's one of the things that in the game design is changing the most is when those things work with current Sentinels, when those things work, they feel great. It's fun to fight against a team of villains. Oblivion's this massive, sprawling encounter that feels epic, but it also feels epic. You got to set it all up. You got to spend hours playing it. And most people have said, wow, not everybody enjoys it, but a lot of people really enjoy Oblivion once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. 4 times is kind of pushing it, and they're like, I don't know. Fortunately, there's a bunch of good heroes in that set that we like. There's a bunch of good environments, but I don't know how often I want to play Oblivion. Well, good news.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot more tools now than we did even 5 years ago when we were making Oblivion, and to make. One of the things, I don't know if you've heard about a thing that we're putting in Definitive Edition Sentinels. It's called events,
Mm-hmm.
where we have this new way of playing Sentinels of the Multiverse, which are these event cards. And there's regular events and critical events are scarier than regular events. Go figure.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But it creates this kind of campaign that you can play through. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds about a thing that's not coming out until 2026,
Sure.
but we're definitely messing around with event style play, informing how Oblivion works, so you don't have to sit down and play the entire Oblivion battle in one massive
Mm-hmm.
sitting. It's like, oh, you can play it in these stages of like, okay, we got to deal with this, so we got to deal with this. Hey, we're dealing with this part of Oblivion over here. Meanwhile, that's one game. There's another game that is what's happening on the other side of the world, or what's happening on the other side of the galaxy. And so there's all the parts of the Oblivion fight. And rather than trying to represent 100% of the parts of the Oblivion fight in one game, break it into multiple games. I mean, the final Avengers movie was 2 movies. Okay,
Sure.
we could do this in more than
That's
one
a good
game.
pitch. Yeah. Very cool. I definitely understand your take on the current Oblivion. I love it.
I love it
it's
too.
It's definitely not for the weak of heart. It's like,
right.
This is what
Yeah.
we're doing today. We are gonna spend here a few hours and all are gonna play this, and you better know how to play, otherwise you're gonna be completely overwhelmed.
Yes. Yeah. No, Oblivion, like the fault of Oblivion. Unfortunately, like I said, good heroes, good environments. If you buy it and never play the Oblivion game, there's still good stuff in there. But the fault of the Oblivion game is it was made for people like you and me. We're like, yes, we're gonna do this. And I have had like demo days at cons. Like at conventions, I don't usually have I'm like doing a million things, but at some smaller cons, I can sit down and play a game all day. And I had 2 days in a row at a smaller convention. Oh, it was all day Saturday, all day Sunday, where I ran 3 games of Oblivion each day. We started 1 in the morning, we did 1 in the midday, and we did 1 in the evening. And then so I did 6 games of Oblivion over 2 days. And then I was like, oh.
I can see that.
We won 4 of the 6 games, so I'll take that. So
that's impressive. That's a very good run, I have to say.
Oblivion is no slouch, and we didn't want it to be. Like, we wanted it to feel epic. We wanted it to be that, but we can do cool things with it. We're keeping the Oblivion arc and the Oblivion events still feeling big and cool and impressive and scary, without saying, and it will monopolize all of your time. Like it'll still to play the entire Oblivion event will probably still take as long, if not longer, with the way that. Anyway, we're getting into future stuff. Sure, okay. This is so many years from now.
I have one last question about Oblivion.
Okay, sure, yeah, of course.
I really like the missions and the reward mechanism.
Yeah.
Is that making an appearance beforehand, or?
So it's unlikely that it'll make it. So a little bit of that got drawn into what we're doing with events, where when you play against a regular event, you're playing the game. When you defeat a regular event, here, let me just get out an event card. Ooh. It's so nice having these. I just been obsessing over them. We got this pre-production copy to make sure that everything was right, and like 99% of I have never had a pre-production copy that was so close to the final copy. I was like, oh, this is good. This is really good. We learned that the rivet sizes for the HP spinners, there's HP spinners, like this is the villain HP spinner. And so it goes up to 209, because my Daryl, my graphic designer, was like, how much is the most hit points that a villain will have? And I'm like, well, in this game, Akash Buddha has 200 hit points. So that's the highest. And so he's like 209, and because the single digit has to go to 9. Sure. And then he's like, are you going to make another villain later that has more hit points? And I was like, not a single villain, no. Oblivion will, but we're gonna break that.
All right.
But yeah, the event cards, like when you're playing the Singularity event, which is the Omnitron event, it says, like, oh man, again, this is terrible. It tells you the name of the event is Singularity. The date of the event is April of 1976. And then it has like a couple of paragraphs of text of like, hey, here's what happens in this story. It has a comic book cover that this is the cover of the first issue of the Singularity event. It tells you that you're playing against the villain of Omnitron, and then it gives you one bit of mechanical thing. It's just like a small mechanical twist that is like, in this event, this is a thing that's true about Oblivion. Then if you defeat not Oblivion, Omnitron. If you defeat Omnitron in the Singularity event, you flip the card over, whoop, and it has more text of like, hey, this is a story of what happened in this event, and here's how it went, and here's how it ended. It has a list of all the comic books that are part of this event, like the Singularity event for Omnitron takes place in Singularity issues 1 through 8, but also Mystery Comics Volume 1, number 359, and Freedom 5, number 315 and 316. Great. So those are all like listed here. You've got a cover from the final or one of the final issues of the event. But over here, you have these things called collections. That you defeat the event, you flip the card over. Great, cool, interesting story, fun art, but you hang on to that card. And in future events, you can use these collections to do one of two things. They have the two things on here. Like this one has two different effects. You can either use the refactored code effect, or you can use the reverse engineered virus effect. And one of them lets you draw some cards to summon some cards, and one of them lets you destroy a thing that's already in play. I don't want to get too into the weeds there, but then when you're playing against critical events, critical events look different. This is the Sunrise critical event. Critical events say critical event across the top of the big letter. And again, they tell you the name and the date. And the date's important because you can then use these to put them into a chronological order to play a campaign. And so as each expansion comes out, because the expansions aren't chronological, it's not that the core game takes place 40s, 50s, 60s, and then each expansion is a decade. Nah, they're all over the place. And so we can put out a bunch of events and you slot them into the chronological order. And if you're like, I don't really want to, I don't want to play the Iron Legacy event, I don't feel it today, just skip it or come back to it later or play it 300 times until you beat it. But so yeah, do critical events. You still have some story. You've got the comic book cover, and you have this here, which is a collection limit, and that tells you how many collections you can bring into here. So once we put out the 4th expansion, and you've played every event, and you've got this massive stack of all these collections, you're like, I've beat them all. I've got them all. Great. Well, you can only bring 5 collections into this very difficult thing. This one you can only take 2 collections into. You have to look through all. You're like, which 2 do I most want? And then critical events don't give you those collection rewards. This tells you who you're playing against, but then to set it up, you flip it over, and it's an alternate version of the villain character card, and it's a different telling of the story. So this isn't the regular Citizen Dawn character card. This is the Sunrise Citizen Dawn character card from the Sunrise event when she merges with the sun, with the solar eclipse rather. And so like each of the different critical events tells you a very different story, and some of them, like the Baron Blade critical event is Mad Bomber Blade. Surprise. The Omnitron critical event is Cosmic Omnitron. But in the core game, there's 6 events, 1 for each villain, and 6 critical events. And some of the critical events are pretty out there, or pretty unexpected. So
all right.
Anyway, all over the place there. So the answer is that was all about your initial question was about mission cards. So there's a bit of that feel here, not within the game spending time doing the missions, but like each game you play can give you these rewards. But the mission deck is really both story-wise and mechanics-wise tied to Oblivion, because story-wise, it's in a lot of ways tied to the Mist Gates. It's tied to the idea that, oh, we're fighting against Oblivion, we need more help from more places, from more realities, so we're going to go to these alternate realities and get these other heroes and bring them in for these things. And really in other games, against other villains, we don't want people focusing on going and doing side quests. You're dealing with the main villain. But with the thing that we're doing with variants over all over this whole arc of games, and the thing we're doing with events over the arc of games, essentially what we're setting people up to do is you're starting in doing your Oblivion missions now. You're starting to collect your hero variants now. You're starting to collect your event collections now. Everything that you're doing as a hero is leading up to this massive conflict. And you'll be able to use all of these tools when it comes to the big final conflict. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. I'm glad to hear about the event mechanism. I didn't know about the other side with the bonuses. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool addition.
They're very interesting. It's fun because each of the collection rewards are based on the story you just played. So when you have Baron Blade's event is the Moonfall event, of course. It's where he first time has the Terra Lunar Impulsion Beam, gonna pull the moon into the earth. You defeat him and you get 2 of effects. And I'll just read you to them because the fun thing is they have a name, and then they have like a bit of story flavor text of telling what you're getting out of them, and then an effect. So the first one, there's two. There's Dangerous Disruption, which says Tachyon hates to admit it, but she's actually learned a lot from observing Baron Blade's rather unsafe practices. She can replicate some of his effects, but with safety measures. And so then the effect is when you activate the collection, you destroy any number of hero, ongoing, and or item cards, and then one villain target deals itself lightning damage +2 for each card destroyed this way. So you deal one target 2 damage. So you're like, all right, guys, I'm going to do the Baron Blade thing where he wipes out all our stuff, but I'm going to destroy like 8 of our cards, and that means that Baron Blade is going to deal himself 2 + 8 × 2, 18 damage. Ta-da!
Nice.
And then the other one is Time Stream Tampering. Someone is altering the time stream. They seem to know you, but you've certainly never heard of anyone called La Commodora. Put one card from each trash under the top card of the associated deck. So the first one's like okay, great, we do a bunch of damage. The second one's like you take a card from a trash pile, you put it under the top card of the deck from each deck. That's like, I don't know how that's useful, but sometimes situationally that's like exactly like, oh, we actually need this exact thing. So usually one of them is like a general, this is almost always useful. One of them's like ooh, you can use it in a clever way. And so that's why there's 2 on each one, so we could get a little bit more creative. And they can hint at like, we're like, who's this La Commodora who's altering the time stream? Someone who you're going to meet in 2026. Like that's the...
Yeah. Very cool. Since we are on villains, which villains are coming out in this first box as well?
Excellent. Good question. So the 4 villains from the original core game are there. You've got Baron Blade, you have Citizen Dawn, you have Grand Warlord Voss, and you have Omnitron. Makes sense. But the core game is focused on 2 teams, the Freedom 5 and Akash Buddha. And so since the Freedom 5 and the Prime Wardens, I gave it away. And so since the Prime Wardens are here, the Prime Wardens' primary villain is Akash Buddha. So if Akash Buddha's got to be in this set. And she is. And then the other villain that is in this set is someone who was in the Rook City set before, but is actually a Freedom 5 villain. She's not a Rook City villain. She's not a Dark Watch villain. She's a Freedom 5 villain. And she's Tachyon's cousin, for goodness sakes, and Tachyon's nemesis. It's the Matriarch. And so the Matriarch herself is in this core game. And people will be like, why are you putting such a difficult villain in the core game? Matriarch's a little bit easier than she was before, but it's all right. Other villains, like, for instance, Grand Warlord Voss, are even harder than they were before. So...
Wow. Okay. So it was a trade-off. That was cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, we've got in the core game, you've got 2 books in the core game. You have the rule book and also a lore book. And the lore book has the complexity and difficulty charts and other like story bio things for each of the characters. But the difficulty charts used to go 1 to 3, and then sometimes there was a 4. And like that's such a small like there's not much space for the error there. So we the new complexity and difficulties are on a scale of 1 to 10. And so like Baron Blade's a 1. Yeah, that makes sense. Matrix is 7. Okay, yeah, that's pretty hard. Grand Warlord Boss is an 8. So
all right.
Yeah.
Is he the toughest of the core box?
Yes.
Okay.
The toughest in the core game is an 8. But if you feel like you need a greater challenge, that's fine. Play on advanced mode, or play on advanced mode in the event with extra mechanics, or play on advanced mode against the critical event.
Yeah, all right. We can lose if you want, is what you're saying.
Right. If you really want to lose the game, we're giving you enough rope. So
that's cool. That's very, very cool. All right. I think I know the answer to this, but are we seeing new heroes at any point, or is it still the same story, same heroes?
I'm excited that you think you know the answer to this. What do you think the answer is?
I think the answer is no, but now you're making me
The answer
wonder.
is yes.
Awesome.
Not in the core game. Not in the core game. But there are new heroes, new villains, and new environments. And it's interesting because I have a hard time thinking of them as new. These are characters that have been around in the stories of Sentinel comics that we've been telling for years, and have just been like, that just like it just never really worked in and never fit. And with the restructuring of this, one of the things we went back and looked at is like, there's not enough nemesis in the game. And There's also some spots here and there for some heroes that we've talked about that haven't gone in. Let's just figure out a way to make it work. So core game is all content that people have seen before, with the exception of event cards, and the variant cards that come in the game are brand new. There's one variant for each hero in the core game, and it's the first appearance variant. And the first appearance variant is representative of their first time they ever showed up in the pages of Sentinel Comics. And so like the regular character card for Legacy has like big picture of Legacy. It's got his hit point amount here. It's got his power, and you've got your incapacitated side with your incapacitated abilities. Okay, great. The first appearance variant for Legacy has all that same information, but the art for it is the literal first appearance. It's the first time that this character ever showed up in the pages of Sentinel Comics, and it even has like a sheen, like it's a bagged comic book. And so the both the front and the back are comic book covers from the first appearance of Legacy, and then a notable defeat of that early Legacy. And so we get to see some cool things like super early costume for the Wraith from the Golden Age, and oh man, Tachyon's first appearance is such a cheesy like Silver Age cover. So yeah, I actually really like Haka's first appearance. Where did I put it? Here it is. Haka's first appearance. His first appearance was in 1948. Is very early on in the Golden Age, and the cover like really represents that. It's got like so much.
Very big change.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Very cool. All right. Will we see a new hero in the first expansion?
Yes.
Perhaps? Awesome. All right. What was else? So many questions. So if I recall correctly, since you announced the new edition, and now I think due to people's feedback, you decided to make the font bigger, correct?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Do you still expect on making any changes until delivery, or
no,
is it like final?
Right. So like I said, I got this pre-production copy, and that was to look at all the things. And as a result of the pre-production copy, we made a few tweaks. I found one card. I always capitalize the words hero, villain, and environment on cards. And going through all the cards, I found one card, and I looked through all the files, all the print files on the computer hundreds of times. And yet I found one card in which villain wasn't capitalized. And I was like, what? And so I don't know to change that. Like, it's not going to hurt the game. Nobody's going to be, this card isn't capitalized the entire game in the trash. Right. But it still was like, it was good to have it in person, look through it, feel the card stock, look at the tokens. Oh, right. That's why I opened this in the first place. And then I got so distracted. I was telling you about the spinners, and I didn't tell you the bad thing about the spinners, which is to say the size of the plastic rivets that make the spinners work was slightly different in the print quote than it is in the final product, which means that the spinner dials, you can see on the top and the bottom, like it moves. It's not exactly tight in there. And so we're like, bad, it's got to change. And we wouldn't have known that unless we had it in hand. So we had it in hand, and we're like, oh, okay, great. So we can go back. That's fine. We can change our print files to make the size exactly correct. And so the stuff that's changing is stuff like that. The stuff that we're like, okay, now that we see it in person, now that we see that the villain spinner and the hero spinners, the hero spinners are great. You have your thing. The trick that we ran into with the hero spinners here is that this is the shape of the the HP burst that's on cards. But problem with that shape is that at the edges of it, some of the numbers can kind of disappear a little bit here. And so we instead took that shape and put the graphic of it onto the cardboard and have a rectangular window, so it'll still look the same, but it'll be easier to read. So there's just a bunch of that's the sort of things that are changing now, where seeing it in person, feeling the components, looking at how things printed, we have more information than we did before. But I don't anticipate not only do I not anticipate any other changes, there won't be any other changes. By the time the Kickstarter launches, the factory will already be making the print plates that the game will be made on. So
all right, very cool. By the way, I really like the addition of the spinners. I had been proxying for a while. It just made everything so much easier than having 30 points of life as tokens. So it's a really cool addition.
Yeah, they're great. It was a fun thing, because we were like, man, when we first sat down to make this game, we wrote up like, what are all the like pie in the sky if we could have anything, and one of the things would be okay, better thing for hit point tracking, because it still comes with some hit points for tracking, some hit point tokens for tracking minions and environment targets and things like that. Unity's golems, we're not going to give you a tiny spinner for every single robot.
Sure, for sure.
But having that spinner on the table, especially because like if something bumps the table, nothing happens. It just sits right there. It also looks great. We've got a bunch of images that we're putting on the Kickstarter of like the table presence of the game and seeing the hero setup. Actually, I'll send you the rule book, and the rule book file. This is the right file. I have so many revisions of this document. Yes, this is the right one. The rulebook file in the middle of it somewhere, I think page 11 or something like that, has a diagram of the table setup, and seeing everything just laid out on the table looks great. Copy the link, put it in the chat here. There you go.
There you go.
So you can have that for your viewing pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I browsed the file. I don't know if it was this one. So which page did you say? Yeah, I see it now.
Okay, yeah.
Nice. What was the reasoning behind the now bigger hero cards? Because they are significant.
Right. So there's three sizes of cards now. There's the regular cards that are like the hero, villain, environment cards that are in the deck. So those are regular playing card size. And then there is there's the hero character cards and there's the villain character cards. And the villain character cards are bigger because there's more stuff on them. But the hero character cards, we wanted them to stand out a bit more, to kind of jump off the table at you. If you're looking at that diagram, you can see that in your play space ends up having this presence where you have your hero character card that shows the like iconic version of that hero, and it looks good. And then right underneath that, you have your deck back, and the hero deck backs are now a collection of panels that kind of tell the backstory of that hero. And so you end up, your tableau ends up telling you like, here's your hero, here's how they look, here's their backstory. And then the cards that you have in hand and the cards you put in play are panels of what's happening right now. And it's just more storytelling at the table. But with all of the stuff at the table, we wanted the hero character cards to kind of stand out a bit more.
So. I really like the change to the back, because one thing that I always felt with the previous edition is like the villains looked so good. The back is like, I want to play this person. And then the heroes were very much the same, because for each set they had the same back. And I really like that. Like now they are not as customized as the villains, but it's still your own back. Like you have your heroes there.
Yeah,
it's really good. Very cool. Thanks for the file. I'll take a look at that.
Absolutely.
Let me see.
Enjoy.
Are there any notable rules change, or just
here and there? So a big thing, if you go to the very last page of the rulebook, the back of the rulebook shows we introduced some new keywords, because they're not keywords, terms. So the game has always had terms that people just had to know what they meant. Fortunately, they're terms that most people who play games know. But if I didn't know anything about playing games, I wouldn't know necessarily what the word draw meant. If I say draw a card, you know exactly what I mean. If I say play a card, you know what I mean. If I say discard a card, you know what I mean. But we hadn't really sat down and formally defined those. And in that process, we're like, you know what? There's certain things we do in the game with some regularity, like go through your deck, look for a certain card or a certain type of card, get that card, put it in your hand, and then shuffle your deck. That's a lot of text. Whereas now we can just say, collect that card. Collect means look through your deck, get that card, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. Salvage means look through your trash for whatever is indicated. Like it could be salvage 2 ongoing cards, or it could be salvage the specific card, the legacy, specific one card name. You could salvage, you just got to indicate what you're salvaging, indicate what you're collecting. Summon puts it directly into play. So if you're like, oh, summon the Staff of Ra, that means look through your trash and your deck, find the Staff of Ra, put it into play. Directly into play. Then we introduced a couple of new ones, which were things that sort of existed in the game, but weren't formalized, which is Discover and Bury. Discover is reveal cards from the top of your deck until you find X, put that X into play, take the other revealed cards and shuffle them back into the deck. And so Citizen Dawn, for her setup now, discovers a certain number of citizen cards. So instead of saying, shuffle the villain deck, look through it until you get this, reveal cards until you get those, put those into play, shuffle the other revealed cards into Citizen Dawn's deck, I just say, discover citizen cards.
Mm-hmm.
Done.
All right.
And then bury is a keyword that means take the indicated card and put it on the bottom of its deck. So you can bury a card from play, you can bury a card from a player's hand, but it's just put it on the bottom of the deck. And so formalizing these terms, bury, collect, discover, salvage, summon, allows us to cut down a card text a bit, but also say, okay, we're not going to do things that are outside the purview of these effects. We don't that's so many tools. If we need more tools than that, we'll do that to get them as we do. I say we're not going to do things. I think we have one Fanatic card that kind of does a different thing. I'll pull it up while I'm talking about this. And so if we need to do different stuff, we can. But what am I thinking of? Boom, boom. This is good radio. I'm looking for a specific thing. There's something that's in the card. Yeah, right. So if we want to do something slightly different, we can. Fanatic's Prayer of Desperation card reveals the top 4 cards of your deck. Put any item or ongoing cards revealed in your hand and discard the other revealed cards. And so that's none of those other effects, but it's because it's supposed to feel like a prayer of desperation. Is supposed to feel like, I don't exactly know what I want, but I know I need something, and it might work fantastically and it might not work at all. And so that's intended in the thing. So if we need to have an effect outside one of those terms, we can just write it on the cards. We still have that ability. But anything that we write on the cards, we say discover 2 cards. The first time you see it, you're like, wait a minute, what does that mean? Let me look at the back of the rule book. And the second time you're like, oh, I remember that. Let me look at the back of the rule book. And the third time you're like, I think it's, and then the fourth time you just know it. And so this adds it makes the game end up playing so much smoother. In general, we've shaved between 15 and 45 minutes off of the game. I haven't had a single game take over 2 hours. Take over an hour yet. Now, mind you, I play the game faster than most people because I have all the text on all the cards memorized. But even still, for me, like a big, tough fight against Grand Warlord Voss takes just shy of an hour, and that's great. That feels really nice that everything's moving so snappily. And it's not because we beat him faster. It's not because he beats us fast. It's because the time that we spend in the game is time like strategizing and coming up with how we're going to deal with these different problems. Not, okay, hold on, I got to do this, and then I got to do that, and then I got to shuffle this. It's like, no. We're playing the game. We're making strategic decisions. We're deciding between which of our various strategies of cards in hand might be the right way to go. Talking about Fanatic has that's some of like the overall rules of the game. So a lot of individual characters have changed. Fanatic has a new bent to her deck, which is she is at her best when she's on the ropes. When she's at 10 or fewer HP, a lot of her cards do different things. So like the card Prayer of Desperation that I was saying, it reveals those top 4 cards you may be going to play. Then if Fanatic has 10 or fewer HP, you play up to 2 cards. That's another good example. Smite the Transgressor is a one-shot that deals 1 target 2 melee damage. That's it. However, then if Fanatic has 10 of your HP, you may use up to 2 powers. And so there's a lot of stuff where she's like, okay, she's good, she's great. She's at 10 of your HP. She's a nightmare. She's super scary. And that kind of already existed, that you wanted to push towards that low HP moment for Fanatic to get your Wrath for Retribution. And Wrath for Retribution still exists, but now lots of her cards have that sort of angle. Bunker as well. Bunker and Tempest are the 2 that probably changed the most. Tempest has much more of I'm controlling lots of weather effects, and I've got to manage to keep control of all of them, but each weather effect is more work to control. So he's got a bunch of cards in his deck that have the keyword weather, and those have very cool, useful effects, but you've got to do something to keep them going, or to keep control of them. Bunker has I always wanted. Bunker was on the right track before, but didn't quite feel like a person managing a lot of subsystems. Like, he's a guy that shoots lots of guns, but he's a guy that shoots lots of guns because he's in his suit that he's piloting, and there's a bunch of things installed on that suit, and he's managing all of them at the same time, and it's a bunch of work. And so now Bunker, he still has his guns. Those are cards that have the keyword ordnance, and ordnance cards work in a specific way that you load cards underneath them, and then when you use the power on them, it destroys a number of cards underneath them as ammo for those effects. So not like the expatriate system where the card underneath it has text. It's like, no, you put a card underneath it, it's just gone, and it counts as just for number of cards underneath that card. And then his mode cards, instead of being these cards that come into play and stay in play until you destroy them, mode cards, you play them, they're in play for 1 round. At the start of your next turn, they destroy themselves. But while they're in play, they have this effect, and they change up things you're doing. They give you more. So like the card upgrade mode, when you play the card, you immediately summon an item card. So you play upgrade mode and immediately take 1 card from your trash or deck and put it right into play. Then during your end phase, you play up to 2 more cards. So upgrade mode gets you whatever you want for free immediately, and then at the end of your turn, plays 2 more cards for you. And that's all upgrade mode does. Start of your next turn, it destroys itself. Upgrade mode also has the flavor text on it that is who Bunker is to me. The new flavor text for upgrade mode is Bunker saying, no, it's not like driving a car. Okay, it's like driving a car, blindfolded, with shoes on your hands, and also you're late. And
Nice.
that's what piloting the Bunker suit is like.
Very cool. And those are the ones you say would have changed the most?
Yeah. Legacy is still very recognizable. Team leader Legacy. He's a bit more team leader inspiring others than he was before, in that his stuff boosts himself far less than it boosts other people. He's very recognizable. Wraith's got lots of gadgets and does cool things with those. Tachyon runs real fast. Absolute Zero is the same mechanics as before, but much more streamlined and easier to understand right off the bat, and also when easier to get up and running. He's got his ability to get his modules which don't even have the module keyword anymore. But yeah, he's good. Argent Adept is one of the ones that changed the least because he was so finely tuned. He's streamlined in a few ways, but pretty straightforward. Captain Cosmic, Unity. Haka changed a bit too. His Hakas now feel more like Hakas than they did before to me. They're ongoing cards. You play them while they're in play. They give you some sort of effect. So like, for instance, Haka of Battle. Where is Haka Battle? Here we go. Haka Battle. It's an ongoing card. You play it while it's in play, +1 damage dealt by Haka. Great. So while Haka Battle is going, you do 1 extra damage. At the start of your turn, during your next start phase. Also, I'm saying at the start of your turn, at the end of your turn, those have been formalized into phases. Every hero's turn is now start phase, play phase, power phase, draw phase, end phase. And they've got a big green text that says start phase or big red text that says end phase. So it really is obvious what phase things happen in. But during Haka's start phase, you discard any number of cards. So it's the same Haka Battle effect. You discard any number of cards, you deal 1 target X damage, where there's a number of cards discarded this way +2, then destroy this card. So it doesn't do you play the Haka card, you draw some cards, you discard some cards, and then that lets you do some damage. Rather, the idea with all the Hakas are you play them, then for 1 round, you're doing your Haka. And then when your Haka concludes, a big thing happens. So you get something while the Haka is happening, and you get something when the Haka ends. So, yeah.
Very nice. How did Captain Cosmic change, or did he not change that much?
He didn't change that much. He got some streamlining, he got some focusing, but he still has his constructs. He still plays them on himself or on others, and Captain Cosmic is I would say changed about as much as Legacy did, which is like just some dialing in, some sprucing up. He's got a couple of new cards. He has a card called Heart of Gold, which is more about him as a person than his powers, but is a helpful card. That it's an ongoing card that gives you a power, and the power is discard up to 3 cards. 1 hero draws up to X cards, and you may play up to X construct cards, where X is the number of cards you discarded. So if you discard 2 cards, then 1 hero, which may be you or it may be somebody else, draws 2 cards, and you can play 2 construct cards immediately. So it allows him to give of himself, which he does with some regularity. I think that's maybe his only new card. Let me see. Yeah, all of his other cards are cards that are recognizable from before. Some of the mechanics have changed. Some of the mechanics have been simplified or spruced up or amplified even. But that's his only new card.
Very cool. I think I'm running out of questions, although I could talk
Oh.
about it for the whole day. But I don't know how. I think the limit is until 10 more minutes, right?
Yeah, there's a medium limit. I mean, we don't have to cut it exactly at 10 minutes, but I should wrap up in the next 20 or so.
All right,
So.
then one of my last questions.
Sure.
What fits into the box? So, because right now the box is larger than before.
Yes.
I assume everything fits and probably
Yes.
sleeved.
Yes.
And how many more expansions would fit into that one box?
So that's another thing that we got out of doing this print, getting this pre-production copy, is being able to complain at the factory about the insert, and now the insert is going to be the way we want it, which is good. But our intention was to have a channel for cards that goes like this, and another channel for cards that goes like this. Oh, also there's another box inside the box, and this box has all the tokens and spinners and character cards in it, and so you can just take that box out, whoop, put it on your table. Got everything you need there, and then get the decks you need. So this all fits here. And as you know, there's not a ton of space. There's some space. Very thin sleeves, they would all fit in this channel. But if you had thicker sleeves, you would need this other channel. And they didn't make this channel. This isn't right. Like this doesn't fit, which is annoying because they could have. It's so close. It's almost there. They didn't do it. So that's fine. They're working back and forth with the factory, making it work. But so given that you have this channel and then this channel, having and that the expansions are big. The expansions aren't as many cards as the core game, but they're not that far. So given that there's that much content in the expansion, like the first expansion has 6 heroes in it, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 villains.
9 villains. That's a lot.
It's a lot. Wow. It's a lot.
If you get 6 in the base box and 9 in an expansion.
Right. So that's not going to fit in here. You could maybe put like some of the content from the next expansion here. The idea is that like each expansion will fit very nicely in its own box, and the boxes will be bigger, easy to organize boxes. A thing that I could see happening in the long run is like, okay, I'm going to have all the heroes in my core box and then all the villains and environments in my next box. But over time, those are going to fill up. I don't know what the best storage solution is, and we kind of won't know it until we have it all. But a thing we're not doing is making another giant collector's case. I'm really glad we did that. It was very fun and interesting to learn, and it cost us so much money. It was a bad idea.
Really?
We lost a ton of money on the collector's cases. But like I said, I'm glad we did it. Only way to do it, because we were like, okay, here's what we want to do. And the factory's like, yeah, you could definitely do that. It would cost us much. I'm like, that's worth it. Like, it'll be expensive, but we'll make them, they'll be expensive and they'll be great. And then they sent us the thing, like, here it is. And I was like, no, if I have all the cards in it, like it's too, I've got to be able to, if I'm holding it 2 feet above a table and I let it go and I drop it onto the table, the corners of it shouldn't burst from the weight. And it's a ton, it's like 35 pounds of cards, so it's got to be sturdy. And they kept rebuilding it until we got to a point that, yes, this is good enough. And that final product was good enough and incredibly costly to make. And so we lost money on every single one of those that we sold. But it's fine. We just never do it again.
It was a lesson. I see.
Right. Yeah. Like sometimes you got to learn things the hard way.
Bonus questions, because so Sentinels of Earth Prime is coming out.
Yes.
Soon,
finally.
And it is not it's not being updated to match this version.
Right.
Do you have any other IPs that are going to use the Sentinel system?
Not currently. I'm very hesitant to do so because the amount of time it takes, like the amount of time it took me to work with them on making Sentinels of Earth Prime was the amount of time it would take me to make an expansion for Sentinels of the Multiverse. And with, like, I don't want to say no, never, you know, but at the same time, I've got the next, like I said, the next expansion has 6 heroes and 9 villains. And so there's a bunch of stuff that's in there that people have never heard of. Whenever I'm looking at one of these things, I'm so tempted to say, like so-and-so, but
but it should.
right. But we're going to get people excited about the core game first, and then once the core game's out, then I can start teasing things. I've already teased enough. There's so much stuff in this core game. Anyway, right. So, given, yeah, it's unlikely that we'll do anything else with that we'll have other IPs in the Sentinel system for now. Maybe sometime in the future. But speaking of Sentinels with Prime not being updated to Definitive Edition, we are releasing a conversion guide that is a 2-page PDF that tells you, hey, if you want to play anything, if you want to play like, or you're like, okay, I love this, but my favorite hero in the world is Parse, and I want to play Parse alongside this stuff, and Parse isn't coming out until the second expansion. She's not in the first expansion, she's in the second expansion, spoilers. Then like it means you're not going to get Parse until 2023. I want her now. Well, you can take your Parse deck and use this conversion guide to like make her work with that. If you've got a fan-made deck, if you're like, oh, I made my own deck, I took my own hero from the RPG game that I played and I made it into a deck, but I made it for original edition, not definitive edition. Great. This conversion guide will help you make that work. It's not perfect. It's not as seamless as like the version taking Parse and playing her with the conversion guide will not be as good as when we release Parse for definitive edition. That's just the case, but it will at least get you there.
All right. Very cool. I already watched some streams, and from what I understand, in the Kickstarter campaign, there will only be 2 pledges: get the game and get the game in sleeves.
Correct. Yep.
And there will be no sort of stretch goals.
Correct. Just straightforward. Launch the campaign this coming Tuesday. I have that face of horror, and I feel that horror deep in my soul when I think about the fact that we're launching a Kickstarter in 4-ish days. But we're ready. It's ready. I've got a couple of graphics that I need to tweak, and Paul was going to give me a few more words to put into the shipping section. But the Kickstarter is ready to go. We're more ready for this Kickstarter than any we've ever run. Like, I mean, we should be at this point. Like, gosh darn it, we've been doing this long enough. We know how this stuff goes, and we're doing a Sentinels thing. Like, we know how it goes. I don't think that this Kickstarter is going to be massively successful. I don't think it's going to be one of these things where it's like, oh no, runaway hit, $2 million. I don't think that's going to happen. I could be wrong, of course, right? But I think it'll fund, and I think it'll fund fine, and I think it'll fund like handsomely, but not in a ridiculous, explosive way, because we're not incentivizing people to get silly about it. We're not doing a ton of stretch goals. We're not doing a ton of add-ons. We're not doing a big like media blitz of like, okay, and if we get this many things, then we'll do this other thing on the side. No. This question is, hey, does this sell itself? That's what we're running the Kickstarter campaign for. We know there is an audience for it. Is there enough of an audience that it's the thing that works, not the marketing, not the I'm doing all these cool marketing things, not the I'm going to offer you all these extra cool free things. If you back the Kickstarter campaign, you get a set of foil cards for all of the character cards, and that's like the extra incentive is you get it first, you get a little bit cheaper, and you get the foil cards. And does that drive enough interest to make Definitive Edition worth it? Because it's a Kickstarter. If we're doing it to learn something about the market that we didn't know. Every Kickstarter is intended to be to learn something about the market, and people have been like, why are you going to Kickstarter with this? Like, Kickstarter is for untested products, and I would posit this is an untested product. A ton of people love Sentinels the Multiverse, and we've gotten a lot of people being like, I don't want you to make a definitive edition. I'm very happy with my Sentinels the way it is. And to them, the good news is that I have not yet managed to make enough time in my schedule to break into everybody's houses and take their previous editions of Sentinels of Multiverse and throw them in the trash. I'm working on it, but like it's just there's so many. It's going to take a while. So since it's going to be a while till I get to everybody's houses, nothing about Definitive Edition invalidates your previous edition. And so I'm not taking anything away from people. And if you don't want Definitive Edition, don't get it. Your life will be 0% negative impacted by you not getting Definitive Edition. However, we strongly believe that if you like Sentinels, there's 2 people that this is for. 2 people in the entire world. This is a terrible product.
That Kickstarter better be small, the hit goal.
Yeah, right. There's 2 pledge levels. So the funding goal is $100, and as long as those 2 people, we find those 2 people and they pledge, we'll be fine. the two types of people for people who love Sentinels the Multiverse and who are like, yeah, no, I agree. The art needs updating and the mechanics could use updating, and this sounds like it's worth it. Great. The other type of people is for people who are either don't know about Sentinels the Multiverse, because we're still selling new copies of the game all the time. So like there are new people coming in to the Sentinels fandom every day. Those people deserve to have something that looks more like this and less like what we made 11 years ago. Or also people who have played Sentinels the Multiverse in the past and gone, I don't really like the art. The mechanics are kind of clunky. This feels kind of dated. I played this game for the first time in 2018, and it feels like this game like came out 10 years ago. And like, yeah, it did. Like the game deserves an updating, and we think that there's people who have already either played or not played but looked at Sentinels the Multiverse and written it off and gone like, nah, this isn't for me. And we hope those people will give it a second shot, because I think it just might be. I think that we've knocked out some of those barriers to entry.
That's very good. So there was always a talk about Sentinels being fiddly with all the modifiers.
Yes.
Do you feel like you reduced this enough that those people might be somehow placated?
I think so. I think there's going to be some people that are like, oh, there's +1s and -1s at all. Bah! But like, there are. There's Legacy still has a base power that gives +1 to all of his allies. Plus, I talked about there's a hockey card that gives you +1 damage. Those have been reduced, and more importantly, reduced in complexity. There's far fewer of the like conditional +1s, like +1 to the next damage you deal. Things that are really annoying to track like that. It's much more flat, like, yes, you have the +1 or you don't. Additionally, oh my gosh, this is a thing I'm really excited about. The graphic design team is so good. The original version of Sentinels the Multiverse, I did the graphic design for, and that was a terrible idea. Like, I was the graphic designer we had for it. Like, Adam was doing all the art, and I was doing the writing and the graphic design and layout. And like, oh man, not great, but it worked. But so I made all the tokens, the like the little rectangular tokens, because like a comic book, and that was good. Well, Daryl and Ray did Ray and Daryl are two graphic designers for this thing and for this product, and Ray did a great job with like all the cards and all of the headers and the hero titles and the layout of it. Oh, it looks so good. Daryl made these tokens so that when you have a +1 to damage dealt, you have a little +1 to damage dealt you put next to your character card. And so if you have two of them,
they stack nicely.
Yeah, and so then the same thing's about damage taken. If you are reducing damage taken, you have these -1s, and so then if something is increasing your damage taken or increasing your damage, or reducing your damage dealt, they stack with these, and so you can really easily look at your tableau, see your tokens, and be like, I know exactly what's going on. Like the math is added up right there for you. So yes, there are still some things to track. The things to track have all the tracking has been reduced significantly. One of the rules that you didn't used to be true that is true now is that anything that the game text isn't in play can't be affecting the game. So a card like Tachyon's Hypersonic Assault before punched a bunch of people, and then everybody that got punched that way can't deal damage. But that card was a one-shot, so then it left play. And you still have to remember, oh, these people can't deal damage, but the card that made them not deal damage has left play. Weird. Now, anything that's like that is going to be an ongoing card of some sort, or like there's not going to be any one shot that comes into play, does a thing, and then leaves play, but the lingering effect of the one shot is still something you have to track. No. Like every effect will be controlled by a piece of text in play at the time, and if that leaves play, that effect is gone. So.
All right. Very cool. So it looks like you put a lot of thought into this. What happens if now the campaign is super successful, people like it? When do you expect the next expansion? 1 year from now? 8 months from now?
So our goal, our very ambitious, but I think totally doable goal, is to follow a very specific schedule. So Sentinels the Multiverse core game, the original edition, not even the enhanced edition, but the original edition, came out at Gen Con 2011. And here we are coming up on Gen Con 2021, and we're going to release this core game at Gen Con 2021. And then our goal is that the next expansion is Gen Con 2022. And then one after that's Gen Con 2023. So it's 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. And that end of summer, that Gen Con event. And when I say at Gen Con, I don't mean like just at Gen Con. Like that will be the time of it. Is the time of Gen Con is when it releases to the world. So we assume that Gen Con will continue to happen.
That's a very big assumption in this year.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, but it gives something to look forward to every year.
There we go. There we go.
Christopher, thanks a lot. I think that's it from my side. I don't know if you want to say something else.
I mean, we're really, Adam and I have always been so excited to get to have the privilege of getting to make this thing. We made the first game mostly for ourselves, entirely for ourselves, and everything that we do with this game is like, what is the thing that we want to have in a game? What's the game we want to play? What's the experience we want to have at the table? And that has continued to be the case, and it's continued to work. And when we had this idea of like, okay, let's go back to the game and make it like the best it can be. Like, yeah, but people are going to be annoyed. People aren't going to want it. People are going to be mad. And they have been. Like, we have gotten mad responses. We have gotten annoyed responses. And that's entirely valid. I get it. And our hope is that when the most diehard, no, we don't want this people, if they don't want it because they don't like Sentinels and they don't want Sentinels, then great. We're not, that's not it. But if they don't want it because they love Sentinels and like, no, I love Sentinels the way it was, we hope that the work that we put into this will show them that's like, no, like this is still coming. This isn't like us selling out and doing a different thing. This is us actually like going even more to our roots and doing the thing that if we had the resources, the graphic design team, the relationships with factories that we do now to make better components, the knowledge as writers and artists and designers that we didn't have a decade ago. If we had that then, we would have made this then. It would have been impossible. We didn't have the capital. Like this is a much more expensive thing to make. We started Sentinels: The Multiverse. We started Greater Than Games with an investment of $50,000, and that's how much it took to get Greater Than Games off the ground. It was $50,000. That is the funding goal for this game. The Kickstarter funding goal for this game is $50,000, and that's this is what we need to bare bones make this game at all. So yeah, we're really fortunate and we're really lucky, and we hope that people are willing to go on this journey with us and experience the stories that we have yet to tell.
All right. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'm really looking forward for it. I'm one of the group that owns all of Sentinels, but wants more and wants even better. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks for watching this video. The campaign for Sentinels of the Multiverse Definitive Edition will hit Kickstarter on 30th of March. I love Sentinels and I highly encourage you to check it out. In true YouTube fashion, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.